Hi, welcome back. In this video we're going to talk about Java variables. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new project. So go File, New, Java Project. I'm going to call it Java Variables. Go Next and Finish. Then we're going to open our project, go to our SRC source, right click, New. We're going to create a package. And the convention is to use the reverse domain name. So we're going to say com.javaprograms.java variables. Okay. Obviously you can put any name you want, but always do follow this convention here. It's very important. Okay, then we'll finish. And then we're going to add our class into our package. So we go New, Class. We're going to call it Variables. And make sure that the public static void main is checked here, because this will allow us to have this main method in our class. So go Finish. And there we have it. Now we have created our class variables, and we're going to get rid of this here. Eclipse usually populates into our code, but we don't need it. So, and also we're going to get rid of the text here. Enter. We're going to still use this multi-line comment here, because we're going to start talking about variables. Alright, so what are variables? Now, variables are like containers we can use to assign values to be used in our program. Just think of variables again. A good example would be of a cup, right? You have a cup that you can put something inside of it. You can put water, or you can insert sand or whatever you like. Okay. Now the first main variable type used in Java is the integer type. So int. This is essentially a number. Okay, so we can add 4, 3, 5. So essentially any number we can think of, we can add. Not necessarily every number, but within limits. Because also in computers, size of numbers matters, because the bigger the number is, the more memory to store you need. Let's take a look at an integer. So let's go here and create an integer variable. How do you do that? Well, first thing you have to do, let's put a comment here. First thing you always have to do to create a variable, every variable needs a type. And then after that, you have to have the name that you choose of that variable. And that's it. So how do we translate that into code? Let's see. We do int, because we want to create an integer variable. So the type is going to be int. And the name of the variable we're going to call myInt. And semicolon. Now, let's go ahead and print that out so we can see what that int has. So system.out.println, and let's pass in myInt. Well, we're going to have a problem here. As you can see, Eclipse is already complaining. It's saying, well, something is wrong. If you hover over, and you will see that it says, well, the local variable myInt may not have been initialized. What that means is every time we create a variable, we have to initialize it. We have to give it a value, okay, initial value. In this case, let's give it initial value of 10. As you can see, now everything works fine. Now, if we were to run this project, we will see that in our console it should output the number 10. So save your project and go to right click. You can click anywhere, but inside this project you can go here, or you can just go to the variables.java and right click and go to run as Java application. And if all goes well, we should see number 10 here. Oh, there we go. We get a number 10. Wonderful. Now let's see other types we can use. The other type of variables we have is a byte. Now a byte is also a number type, So you can assign numbers such as 4, 2, 5, 2, etc. But the thing here, the difference to notice is that a byte is a much smaller container. So it's not as big as the integer. So if you ever want to use a smaller container to store certain kind of numbers, then you would use a byte. And how we do that? Well, let's go ahead, follow the same principle we have here, type and then a name. So we start by a type, which is the byte, and we're going to call it my byte. We're going to say, let's say 120. Okay. Now if you go again here, say system.out.println and say my byte and command save and run this again, run as Java, we should see 10 and 120, and you can see here. Okay. Now let's go to this third one. Now the third type we're gonna look at is the long type. Now the long type, you can insert numbers as well. The good thing is that the long type is 4 times as big as the integer. So this container integer long type is 4 times as big as the container that holds integers. So if you need a variable that could hold a bigger number, obviously you'll have to use the long. And how do we do that? We do the same thing. So by now you can see the pattern here, right? So you get long, my long is equal to that number there. Okay, and we can do the same. We can output to the screen system.out.println, and we're gonna call, this is our reference, right? The long type that we just assigned this number here. And as you can see, when we assign, we use the equal sign here. So what this means, we're saying that whatever is on the right of the equal sign will be assigned to what's on the left. So we're saying here, my long now holds this number here. So whenever we want to access this number here, we're gonna just call my long. The same goes to the byte we just created, as well as the int, my int. So that's how you assign all of them. So whenever you see the equal sign here, it's not the equal in a sense, the mathematical equal. It's more of assignment. You're saying that whatever is on the right, it's gonna be assigned to what's on the left. Okay, so let's go to add here my long, command save or control save, and then let's run again. And you should see 10, 120, and this big number here. Wonderful. Now let's go and talk about the next one. Next one is called float. A float is a decimal number. So you could have 3.4, 3.7, 3.9, and so forth. Okay, now how do we do again? Yes, you guessed it. So we go float. My float is equal to 3.4. Now we have a problem here. Well, it turns out in Java, every time you want to create a float variable, you have to add an f in front of the number that you are assigning to the variable. Meaning that, as you see here, we have my float variable of type float, and we're assigning it to 3.4. And as we do that, we have to include f so that Java knows, oh, you're talking about a float. So that this number has floating points. Okay? And we'll do the same here. System.out.println, and we're gonna again have that my float inside here, passed it in so that we can see in our console here. So let's run it. Run as Java application, and we should see all of these numbers 3.4. Okay. Now the next one I'm going to talk about is the double. The double is twice the size of a float. So you could have, if you wanting to create a variable that holds bigger floating numbers or bigger decimal numbers, then you more definitely gonna have to use a double. Okay, so essentially it is a decimal number that we can add to the variable. It's just 3.4 and all of that, but it's twice the size of float. So the float, if you think as the container analogy that we're talking about, if it's a small cup, well, the double is going to be a cup but twice the size of the float. Okay, so let's do the same thing again. So we go now to create a variable of type float, you go double my double is equal 3.4. Now notice here I don't have to put an F here, because if I put an F here, then it would assume you could, but we won't do that, because then we want to make sure to see the differentiation here, how these two are different. Same number, but here is a float, this is a double. That's how we know it's a double, besides the fact that we have the type telling us that this variable is the double. So let's change this number to something 3.9, and let's do the same. System.out.println got my double. Okay, we have a typo here. Out always happens. My double. I made a mistake here. As you can see, your variable names have to be exactly the same, otherwise you will always have errors. Okay, so we have that here. So we save it and run it. We should get all the values that we have assigned and displayed. The other one we're going to talk about is the Boolean. The Boolean type is very interesting and the simplest form, because this one here only allows two states, only allows two values, false or true, also known as 0 or 1. So the Boolean only holds true or false or 0 or 1. Okay, and how do we assign that? We say Boolean, my Boolean is equal to false. Okay, so that's how you start. You create a Boolean variable. Now let's try something here. Let's go system.out.println my Boolean. See what happens here. I'm gonna save. Right. What do you think is going to happen? In Java, and there, it showed. Right. So because we said the Boolean, my Boolean is a false. If you go to true, what do you think is going to happen? Yes, you guessed it. It's going to say true. Wonderful, you did it. All right. So now that we talked about variables, one thing you always have to remember in Java, you always have to have a type for a variable, right? And it's very important that you make sure, especially for this primitive, these are called primitive types, you assign them initial values. Otherwise, you will always have that error because they need to be initialized before they can be used. And then you can assign values that you want. Alright, well, congratulations. Now you know about variables. In the next video, we're going to talk about output strings and numbers on the screen. Alright, I'll see you in the next one.